You should.
Remember that time we interviewed Grandpa and we're going to tape him?
Yeah.
He'd been telling those stories.
And he just
He said,
clammed
well,
up.
rode through the weather one night, big storm, till they get to the doctor. It was pretty wild and rough. That's about it.
And he'd been telling these big, long, elaborate stories, and he froze.
As soon as he knew it was there, being recorded.
Okay, so Julie Heupel and Dennis Magee are recording our Uncle Jed Magee, Gerald W. Magee, on April 15th, 2023.
In Harlan, Iowa.
In Harlan, Iowa.
Can you, Joel? Can you prop it up and then go get your computer and show some pictures? Let him
Maybe.
feed off of that.
Yeah, but I'm recording, so start asking questions.
Born July 20, 1943.
Okay.
Only child out of 8 in the family born in a hospital. And
Okay.
a good thing, because I only weighed 4 pounds, 3 ounces.
And everyone else was born at home.
Everyone else
And you had one sister who died.
at infancy.
Yeah,
Phyllis.
Phyllis.
She was like the second or third child.
So
And
you
I
were the
think-
baby.
Right, and I think most of them were delivered by Grandpa Tom. I might have had doctors some of the time, but I don't know. And in pretty rough circumstances, minimum housing, minimum.
So would the doctor who delivered, if he was there, it would have been Doc Buckmaster.
Probably for Tom, from Dave, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know about the others, like your dad, Raleigh, I don't know.
All right. You go run that thing.
And it could be because, of course, that's
Fingers in front of him.
why Raleigh was named Raleigh. He was named after the doctor.
Well, that's what we always remember hearing, was he was named for Doc Buck.
And Raleigh Ralph for brother and Ralph, mother's brother.
Right. What happened to Ralph?
Well, Ralph and his father, Louis, had a falling out at some point, about 1920. And Ralph took off for California and never came back. Never. California for several years. I don't know if he got married or not, but anyway, he got a lady pregnant.
Yeah.
Barbara, I think, was her name, or something like that.
Or was that the baby's name? Was Barbara?
Barbara.
That's it.
Anyway, that didn't work out. Whether they got married or not, I don't know, but it didn't work out. And he basically fled California because she was after him for money. And he went to New Zealand first, and then he went to Australia and never came back. There were proceedings that the woman brought in Iowa against Grandma, Martha Magee, or Martha Fussell, to get child supported guardianship. They had a fight over the guardianship
Of this baby in
of
California.
this baby.
Okay.
And there were letters that existed Grandma had between them and I think a lawyer or somebody in Waterloo about that. And I think he did end up having to pay, at least for some period of time. And then he moved from New Zealand to Australia and got married and had children. Mother had kept all of his letters, including some he wrote from New Zealand, and like the very first one he ever wrote from New Zealand or Australia. Mother kept those all those years. And during World War II, he kept writing. Always said he was going to come back when he came.
So his father, Louis Fussell, when did he move to Dunkerton specifically to open a harness shop, or?
I don't know that. I don't know how he got into the harness business, because he's from Waterloo. Kind of a talented, scholarly kind of guy. Belonged to singing groups and belonged to a band.
He was kind of like in the upper echelon of Dunkerton society, would you say?
I would say so.
Yeah.
He sang and he played instruments. He had a lot of old music that Mother kept, Etude magazine. And she had stacks and stacks and stacks of National Geographics that he had saved over the years from 1910, 1911. They were still in her house when they moved to town. Fortunately, I think a lot of them got thrown away. But he was scholarly, is all the way I put it. I have his big book, which I should give you to give the museum, a big history book, a big blue book, or did I give that to you?
Mm-mm.
It's from 1911, 1912, sepia colored, and it's big. It's like 24 inches by 28 inches. Pictures of of the warring countries in World War II or World War One, and all the different monarchs and rulers in Europe. And I spent hours and hours leafing through that book when I was a kid. But he was very interested in those kinds of things.
So this is kind of a favorite photo that includes Louis Dressel. It's an old, what kind of car?
Packard, or is that I don't know what that is. Probably not a Packard. Could be a Packard.
It has Charles H. Dunkerton and his wife Adele, who was a Magee, right? Their daughter Melba, and then Herb Brandt, Harriet Renz, and Louis Dressel are in the back, and I believe they were clerks, or some of them were clerks in the store.
Probably. I don't know how he got started in his harness shop. I have no idea how that came about.
So I found an ad once in my Google searching, and Louis Dressel was kind of a harness maker known around the country for quality. I'll have to find that again.
I don't doubt that, because he was, I think a real ethereal kind of guy, a real mental guy, interested in a lot of things, interested in education. I have no idea what his education was or training was.
Did you know him personally?
No.
I mean, no.
See, he killed himself in 1938, I think. I was born in 1943.
And why? Tell that story.
Well, I think he either left a note or he told people he's too old to learn a new trade, and the harness trade was gone or going away because everybody was buying cars and tractors.
Right.
So he was too old to learn something new.
So we just kind of gave up. Now, was the story that he went home and had lunch?
I don't know that, but I do know somebody who saw his body.
And that was
Shirley Jones.
Yep, I've heard
Told
that
me
too.
when she was a little girl, she was 5 or 6, looked in the window and saw his body laying in the harness shop.
Yep.
For a long time, until I was probably in junior high school, I never knew about this story, that he killed himself. And I always wondered, because they had a very nice house, as you now know. I can't believe you didn't know that.
I didn't know that. Kim and Pat Alla live in the
I thought
Russell
everybody
house.
knew that. That was their house.
You gotta tell us.
It's a huge house, nice house.
Yeah.
I always wondered, how his wife, how Martha, got along. Supposedly, she then ended up renting a little house down at the depot. Brother Dave always talked about visiting her there. He called it the doll house. Little tiny house.
So down by the Dunkerton Depot, you're saying?
That's what Dave told me. I don't ever remember that. All I remember about Grandma is she lived out on the farm. They moved her out to the farm. How the hell they found room for her, I don't know. I think she had that big bedroom upstairs. I don't know if she had it with Marty. Because 3 of us boys lived in that little tiny room. I don't know where Raleigh was at that time. Well, originally I slept downstairs in Mom and Dad's bedroom in a baby crib until I was 6 years old. I can remember my legs sticking out the end of the crib. And I think Raleigh, Dave, and Tom were upstairs in that little tiny room, and Marty and Grandma were in that bigger bedroom. I cannot remember talking to her or seeing her. I do remember her funeral, because like they did in those days, they had her laying at home. After she died, and she was on I don't know, I thought it was a platform or something with roses, a big arbor with roses over it. I remember that in what at that time was our living room, dining room.
So would that have been not the south side living room that we remember?
Well, that wasn't built in 1950.
Right. So in the big old dining room?
So all there was downstairs was 3 rooms. Kitchen, dining room, bedroom. Dining room was also living room. It still had no name on it, but we had a couch in there and some chairs.
Okay. So she would have been laid out in there.
Yeah. And Mother had her dining room furniture in there. I don't know how it all fit. Because that living room, the new living room, didn't get built until about 1950 or 51. I remember Lloyd and Pete and the Magee construction people came out and helped.
So when you were growing up, the living room that was on the south side of the house, that meant the bedroom upstairs was not there either.
Nothing.
So when you say the big bedroom, you're talking about the one on the west side upstairs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not very big.
Not very big. And it had a big closet on the north end.
Yes, it
side
did.
there.
And our
We
son's got
never
locked
went
in.
into it. We never used. It was full of grandma's clothes, my grandma's clothes, and old clothes from mother and kids, and we never used it. It was just packed full of that and mother's keepsakes. Once in a while, I would crawl in there and play or look in there, but we never took anything out. And it was a pretty good size.
So the front doors that were blocked up when we lived there on the west side that faced the road, those were the original doors to what?
Well, I think that was for the store, and they were open. We opened them in the summertime.
Of the Lester Center
There
store.
were screens there, and we opened them to let the air through in that hallway. I played in that hallway for years and years and years until
So did
we converted it to a little half bath.
Yeah.
Dave and Raleigh did that one weekend when Mom and Dad were getting older. But for years it was a hallway. And of course that little narrow stairway was always really narrow and steep.
Yeah.
So, going back to Main Street, so if you start at, say, McMillan's, or maybe start where the old bank was, on the north side, and you hop across the street, McMillan's, which was later Smith Electric, and then Ettringer Electric. What, as you go farther west, so bank,
And next door was either Speed's Tavern or Magee Drug.
and we're talking in the 50s, we're talking?
Yeah, it was a Magee Drug. When Eddie Magee died, I don't know how long it was after he died, Linford Bauer, his son-in-law, built a new Magee Drug across the street on the south side.
The green building that we all remember.
That we know as Magee Drug,
Yeah.
was on the
But
south
that was
side.
the second.
Oh, to us it was a big deal. A cement block building, modern, you know. And went across the street was an old wooden building, crappy. I was only in there, I think, once or twice, maybe.
The old one.
Yeah. But that was Eddie Magee, or E.W. Magee.
And he built that, as far as you know? Don't know.
But then it seemed like there was a building next door that was empty, wooden building.
Do you have any Main Street pictures?
Yeah. See if I can find it.
And of course, then you go down the street, and then there was a telephone office, old telephone office, and the telephone operator lived there. It was Reckimer,
Margie?
Margie Reckimer.
Margie, and her husband. He was a grump. You know, he answered the phone. He didn't like the phone to ring after 6 o'clock. And when he answered it, even when it was before 6 o'clock, it was just grumpy and gruff, you know. I got him. He just mumbled it. You didn't know what he was really saying. And of course, all I had to do was tell him I wanted to call home. And after school, sometimes I had just things after school. I'd go down there and call home and say, just call home. I didn't tell him anything other than just call home, and he knew the number. And our number was long, 2 longs and a short. No, 2 shorts and a long was our party line number.
So you would just walk into the telephone office and say, call home?
Yeah, he was sitting there behind the counter with the switchboard next to him, sitting on a chair.
What'd that cost you? Nothing?
No, the bedroom is off to the north. That's where they lived. It didn't cost you anything.
So that switchboard, is that the one that is now in Jefferson?
Well, supposedly,
Okay.
I know Jefferson Phone Company is an independent phone company, and at one point they were going around Iowa helping convert to dial. And one of the towns they did was Dunkerton and settled bonds. And I was told that they took that switchboard, and it's in their private museum in Jefferson. That's what I've been told anyway. Our museum in Jefferson has another switchboard just like it in our museum. I don't know where that came from for sure.
So continuing on Main Street, Dunkerton on the north side, what else do you remember?
The only thing I remember there was Hafner's barber shop, George Hafner, and he lived right next to the Baptist church.
So was that also the barber shop for Paul Bowser?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think they were related somehow.
Okay.
Yeah, he became the barber later on, but Hafner had it for years. Dad used to go in there because you always went to town on Saturday night when you went. And on occasion, Dad would go in there and get a shave or a haircut. And there would always be people sitting waiting, pot-bellied stove, typical old barber shop. Hafner was a little guy and kind of a slick, clean-looking guy, but not very big. His son or grandson supposedly was a quarterback for University of Southern California at one point. Came back to visit and was bragging about his exploits one time. But I remember Dad gave me advice. He said, "Oh, if you go to a barber and I give you a haircut, don't let him shave your neck." I never quite understood what that was all about, but use clippers instead of using a razor because it comes back like a whiskers. That's what Dad said. Don't let him shave your neck.
So is this with a straight razor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have one.
I never had a barbershop haircut until I went to college.
Really?
Dad always cut my hair.
Yeah.
Well, he cut all of our hair.
Yeah.
That's where I learned, and your dad learned.
Mm-hmm.
We have some shaving mugs.
She showed me.
Yeah. What's the story? Do you recall any of that?
No, I don't. No, because I think Dad probably shaved himself most of the time when he shaved. Once a week, maybe.
But if you went to the barber shop, did you have your own mug on display?
I don't remember. I know there were dumb mugs there.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have one, and Dad didn't have one. Dad didn't have that kind of money.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't have been able to buy a mug.
Well, and the ones we have would have been
Upper
merchants in town who
Yeah.
would have maybe had some money.
Yeah.
Seems like Mother had Louis Fressel's mug at one point.
Hmm.
I think I remember seeing that many years ago. And he probably would have had one. Because he was pretty fastidious, I think.
So keeping going down the street, wasn't there a lumberyard down there somewhere?
Well, past the barber shop, then would be, I don't know whether there's buildings in between, but then there was a Legion Hall on that side of the street.
So we're talking the north side of Main Street.
American Legion Hall, and that's where we had the Bartholomew Ranges for years and years and years. We always met there. Wooden floors, typical old post-World War I building.
Mm-hmm.
Peter Kress, I think, was the first.
World War I guy.
Yeah, and that was the name of it. What's that? And then that was the end of it. I think it was an empty lot, and then across the street was the lumberyard.
On the south side now?
No, north side. North side
Oh, okay, I got you.
was the lumberyard.
So I think this picture I got up is the south side.
That looks like
On
the
Main
south
Street.
side. That was the old restaurant when I was in high school. Was Wellness Restaurant,
Okay.
and I think the bar or the Herna shop, personal Herna shop, sat next to it, or maybe two doors down on that south side. That I don't know. That second building, I don't know what that is. Third building, I don't know. Down at the end, the tall building, I think was Shimp Hardware.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the block, across from the Legion Hall. Right next to it was another tall building that you said might have been an old hotel. And I know that Granny lived there. We used to go visit her in the back. She lived in the back on the ground floor.
And is that where the funeral home was, too, then?
Well, the funeral home was up closer to
Okay.
the east. And somewhere in one of these buildings, like right in the middle, Russ and Ruby Rudolph had a grocery store temporarily for not very long, just a couple of years.
And it was called Rudolph's Grocery?
I think so.
We'll have to look
And
for receipts.
we shopped there because they were Baptists. And I remember going in there, and they still had the old time stuff. They had a vinegar barrel. You took in your jug, and you turn the tap, and you fill up your vinegar jug. And they had a Cracker Barrel. I had, I think, a barrel full of potatoes or something, I remember. Real old-fashioned.
At some point, the post office was down on Main Street as well.
Oh, I forgot the post office. It was in there, too, by the barber shop.
On the north side.
On the north side. Yeah, the post office is in there.
Big flat front.
I don't remember going in there, though. We would never have gone in there for any reason that I can think of. You didn't mail stuff. You didn't mail letters. If you had to, you mailed them at home. Well, I don't remember ever being in there.
So do you remember the train depot? And did you ever ride the train?
I never rode the train. I do remember the train depot. Mother rode it every week to go to East Waterloo to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
They called it the interurban.
Yeah.
She went to East High and graduated from East High. She could have started at Dunkerton at the new high school in 1922, graduated in 23, but she elected to continue to go to Waterloo and stayed with her aunt. I can't remember which aunt it was. but she rode it back and forth.
Would that have been expensive to ride the train every day to
Probably
school?
not. You know, might have been a
But she-
dime.
But she probably didn't ride every day. She would have gone
No,
in
Monday
and stay the week.
Monday and
Yeah,
Friday.
and then come back.
Probably cost a quarter or maybe
Stay
a
with
dime.
who?
Dime.
His aunt, or her aunt. So, like Gertrude, Hortense, those
No,
aunts?
no. Somebody lived on the east end of Waterloo
Okay.
by the high school. And I think I have her diploma too from high school. And a friend of mine who was into genealogy from Charles City has now passed away. I was telling him these stories, and he loved digging up stuff. He goes to St. Louis. He lived in St. Louis. All of a sudden, one day in the mail, I got an email from him. Notice the graduation, Lewis Russell, East Waterloo. I can't remember what year it was. I don't know how the hell he found that or remembered that, but he looked it up.
So that's probably why Grandma.
So that's where he
Went to
graduated
East.
from, was East High. I have to tell you a story about the depot. I don't know if I ever told you this. When I was in high school, before my senior year in high school, Jack came up to visit from Kansas City. Why or how, I don't know. And how he got there, I don't know, because he didn't have a car. But he stayed, and we had a blizzard. I mean, a real blizzard. Drifts, you know, up to the barn, up to the garage. He had to get to work. He had to fly out of Kansas City, and he was scheduled. So I got to get to work. He said, and the road was closed. I mean, it was a blizzard. So we saddled up Goldie, the horse, put a blanket on her, and saddled, and I rode him to Dunkerton so he could catch the train, flag down the train, because there was no passenger trains. He had to flag it down at the depot. Took that into Waterloo, got on a plane at the Waterloo airport, and flew to either Chicago or Kansas City.
Yeah, that's
Got on a
cool.
horse, train, jet.
So he could fly
Yes.
because he was co-pilot
Yeah,
for
yes, so he could
TWA.
keep on his schedule. Yeah. Cold, oh God, it was cold. We rode that old horse, had a blanket on her, the two of us, bundled up.
What year are we talking?
Well, I was probably a senior in high school. It was either 60 or 61. It was probably 60 because I graduated in 61, 59 or 60. I don't know how he got there and how he didn't have a car. And even if he had a car, it didn't any good because the road was closed. Yeah. The road was 2 feet deep, and your road was 2 foot deep in snow. And I always thought about that horse, train, plane.
So Grandpa Tom Magee, he tell us about his farming, and he had milk cows. And he would go into the creamery, would sell milk, right, out of a garden or out of a wagon. No?
When he had the dairy, he sold milk in bottles to the customers.
Okay. Did he deliver it?
I can barely remember. I was like 6 or 7 years old. He had an old gray 1940 Chevy car, built before the war, before we got in the war. Hooked a old hay rack on the back of it. Loaded steel crates full of milk bottles with a couple of kids, 2 or 3 kids. Drive to town, delivered the milk to different people, collected the empties. Some people get 2 quarts, some people get 4 quarts.
So the kids were the runners?
We were the runners. And then we had small pint jars full of cream. I can remember just doing that a few times. I was real little. But I remember the worst time was when Tom was running up to a house, and he would have been like 10, fell down and gashed his hand on a milk bottle.
Yeah.
So we took him immediately to see Doc Buck, who sewed it up. I mean, really gashed it, and I was just freaked out because he was bleeding like crazy.
Oh.
And anyway, that's how we delivered milk.
So he didn't take milk to the creamery?
Nothing. Never took milk I know of.
Mm-hmm.
And then he lost. He had a competitor south edge of town, and he raised his price from 4 cents to 6 cents a quart, and half the people quit on him. And that's when he quit doing milk. Then after that, it was just cream.
Okay.
Milk the cows, separate the cream, and then go once a week to the creamery.
I remember the little milk house that had the separator in it. Yeah.
We used to have to wash that every day with boiling water, bring it out from the house. If we didn't do it, Mother had to do it. I mean, she worked from dawn till dark. I mean, just, we had to take boiling water out there, and you had to take the separator discs out. You know, you've seen those, that pyramid shaped.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what you call it, where the discs were separated in cream. There's like 100 discs in there,
Oh, wow.
50. You had to wash every one of them. And
So
had to-
twice a day for both milkings,
no,
or
he
you just
that
did this
he
once a
did
day
that at night.
at night?
And then you had to wash the separator machine and all the other stuff too, besides those discs. Hated washing those discs because they'd get real thick with cream, and during the day they'd get sticky. I had to wash every one of them, hot water, and then you had to wash the big bowl that sat on top, and you had to wash the spouts. I remember the milk bottles. I don't remember washing them, but we always had a lot of milk bottles and had big long tubes, cardboard tubes full of cardboard caps, put them in a big tube, and you know that's how you seal the milk bottles.
So how many cows did he milk? Because that barn wasn't very big.
Well, it was the old barn.
Oh, not the barn I remember.
No, yeah.
Okay.
Because we tore that down and built a new one in about 1960.
Okay.
I don't know how many he had, but he probably had 10 or 15 cows. Big Guernseys, of course, they had a ton of cream. The other thing, everybody had to help wash milk bottles. I remember Marty talking about washing those milk bottles. Raleigh and Dave. Inventor Dave, he figured out a way to, he had a brush, a special brush from the Fuller Brush Man. Hot water brought from the house. Dave rigged up a motor on a brush, put a brush on a motor and a pulley, and rigged it somehow with electric so you could just stick the bottle on there and cut the washing time in half.
Sure.
That was Dave, typical Dave.
So speaking of inventions, you were talking about a tiling machine earlier.
Yeah.
So who invented this tiling machine?
Big Joe Bartholomew, who was the blacksmith, had the tiling business when I was growing up, built that tiling machine from scratch in his blacksmith shop. The wheel that dug the dirt was probably 10 or 12 feet high. Big shovels on it, a motor on it. You know, he built the whole thing. He operated it. Uncle Dave worked for him a couple summers laying tile.
And this would have been clay tile, laid by hand.
Yeah. One time, and it was steam driven. I remember that. I don't know quite how that was, but it was steam driven because Dave came home one day and he had a great big blister on his thumb, about that big. Steam pipe broke or he got too close and steam hit him and burned him. He had a great big blister on his hand. Looked awful, but he kept right on working. But Big Joe was something else. Big Joe Bartholomew, Dad's cousin. Big man, about 6'4", 6'5", 300 pounds. Then in spare time he built and made violins. And then played them. I've seen him play them with his great big fingers. Oh, and self-taught, of course. But how he could play those, I don't know. We used to go to that blacksmith shop at least once a month for some purpose to get being interviewed.
You're getting eyed.
I've got an eagle eye.
Okay.
Anyway, we went there about once a month. Horseshoes, or not horseshoes, but like cultivator pieces, mower pieces and stuff. Racks and racks of horseshoes around the building.
Where was that shop at?
Well, it was north of McMillan's, across the alley, down by the creamery.
Down by the creek.
Down by the creamery, toward the old bridge. Just before you get to the bridge.
What happened to that?
It's still there, I think.
The building?
I think. And Rob said it's still there.
Yeah, Rob said it was
Still there, empty, but still
What happened
there.
to the creamery then?
And the creamery's still there? Isn't that where Pat had her shop for a
No.
while? Pat McIntosh? She had a shop down there.
Well, she's in a house.
But before,
Sycamore. I don't know.
didn't she have it down there in the creamery? I think she did.
Could be.
It's a creamery and locker. So after we quit milking cows and selling milk, we started selling cream. So every weekend or on the end of the week, we'd take cream to the creamery. I loved that trip because it was always warm in there, steam, heat. You know, he'd steam out the cream can, he'd steam the lid, you know, and then he'd show us the butter, a great big butter churn. It was like 6 or 8 feet around or high and 10 or 12 feet long, big wooden paddles in it. give us a taste of butter. It was always hot and warm in there because it was steam, all steam.
We've got some good creamery building pictures with the big
And
chimney
next door
on the
was
end.
the locker plant.
Okay.
The other thing we did was, because we raised pigs, so we could, after you took the cream and he made the butter, he didn't sell the buttermilk, he just put it in a big vat up on our loft, so you could get all the buttermilk that you wanted for free to take to feed your hogs. So we'd always go up there, and I'd have to go up in the loft where there's tons of flies and stir that messy buttermilk stuff from the cream. And my brother, there was a big hose outside, would fill a bunch of cream or milk cans. We'd take 4 or 5 milk cans full of sour buttermilk out
And take to the hogs.
and then slop the hogs. You know.
So, jumping around a little bit, but we have a picture looking down the hill from where the high school is, and there's a church steeple there that doesn't exist anymore. Would have been fairly close to the Baptist church. Any idea what that would have been?
So was it a church or was it a school?
No, it was a
What's
church.
a steeple?
Yeah, it's definitely a church.
I have no idea.
What, other than Main Street, how much of Dunkerton existed in the 50s? The school was there.
Well, Floyd Spees had his shop up there by Marv's Feed and Seed up by the cemetery.
Or
He had a
Stephens? Or
shop.
Stephens?
He had a shop downtown, but he built a new building up by the cemetery. It became a repair shop. In fact, he was the last milk customer. He drove out to our farm every Sunday morning, and my dad would have a glass bottle of milk and a pint bottle of cream for him. And he did that for years. Drove out there every Sunday for years and years. He was a good guy. Of course, they were good Baptists. So. Gladys and my mother were good friends. And she was a neat lady.
Okay. We're getting signals to end our.
Well, I'm just saying 7 o'clock. And so
I think
We're leaving.